willing and able. Very grateful that all of you were willing and able to make this additional time available in order to meet on the Constitutional Convention matters. I wish that we'd been able to get together with you on August 7th, and had we realized, we would have done it because it doesn't take us long to do the presentation. Unfortunately, that didn't happen then, but look at how many of you are here today. Thank you so very much. So I'm going to ask Auntie Carol to take over right now. She is our Mistress of Ceremonies today. Auntie Carol, you're muted.
Let's unmute because as kupuna, sometimes we don't remember what we were supposed to do. Aloha again. We're so very happy that you took this time to gather. You all know, if anyone does in the association, Oahu Council leads, and at least those of us in Ale Makalapua, we look to you for some of the examples and the leadership that you provide the association. But on this particular afternoon, we're here to learn, to know, to be updated on what's going to happen with Constitutional Convention coming up in November. There've been lots of legwork and heads put together in the last few weeks. And CONCON has been led by our Hope Pelekina Mua, Dre Kalili, and we acknowledge her and her direction and guidance. And of course, for Policy and Planning Committee Chair, Edie Kawai. On the committee is Rusty Rodenhurst, Jerry Bell, T. Furtado, and me. Before we begin though, and we understand that there were some questions that had come up, we would like to postpone those for now. But if you have questions relative to the presentation, please put them in the chat. And Jerry and T. Furtado will monitor that along with Kili'i, please. So aloha, thank you for having us, and we give you back the mic and the camera.
Mahalo. Mahalo, Auntie Carol. So before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that today's work is a learning session. It's not going to be a time for us to dive into actual sections of either document and tear them apart and come up with new language or deleting old language. This is a time where, for those of you who have been around since the last Constitutional Convention, this will be a review. And I know it was worthwhile for me to do the review because I remember Anel being there, and I remember Kale Aina, but as far as context and the various things that we worked on, not there anymore. So it was a good review. And for those of you who have joined the association and joined your Hawaiian Civic Club since 2011, this will be a brief overview with details so that at least we can get you up and running to a point where you can go ahead and conduct your own review with your club of both of our governing documents and look at them critically, because this is a time when our association gathers for what I like to call critical self-examination. And we do that by looking at our governing documents and see how they function, whether they'll function for the next 100 years. Are they relevant? Do they comply with the laws? Are we doing things correctly? Are we pono? So this is a time where we're going to be focusing on those questions. So I have asked Benton, and he's been very gracious to run the PowerPoint that we have for you today. And I'll announce each slide as it comes up, and he'll be flipping through for us. So let's have a look at the first slide. Constitutions and bylaws, what are they and why do we need them, for heaven's sakes? We know that the United States, go back. We know that the United States has a constitution. I mean, we all learned that in school and it seems like such a huge word. and a huge thing. But then, of course, we have organizations and corporations and associations like us, and we have constitutions and we have bylaws. So now's the time that we dig into the meaning behind those big words. So if we look at corporations, we as human beings, we are individuals who exist under the law. We have rules to follow. When countries are put together and formed, they have a set of rules by which the people in that country agree to live and operate. And so we all accept that we are regulated by state and federal laws. We pay taxes, we serve on juries, we pay traffic tickets, we go to court, and so much more. And we know that our lives are very, very well managed by the laws. But what about corporations? And our association is a corporation. What about associations? Well, let's go ahead and go to slide 2. And corporations for us today, this is our starting point. Our corporation, as I said, the association is a corporation. They are legally created entities under the law. It's where people with similar interests or purposes, such as business owners, set up corporations in order to conduct business or to conduct a certain type of business that they wish to carry out. In this case, our corporation is set up to carry out the business of our association. So that means that corporations are governed by state and federal laws, and they are able to legally act on their own. They pay taxes just like we do. They can own property, they enter contracts, they can be sued, they can sue, and then when they are sued independently of the people who form them. They are responsible for their own debts and their own actions. So let's look at slide number 3. But unlike us, a corporation needs a legal document to define its powers, its authorities, and structure. So let's go to the next slide. In fact, what it needs is a constitution that defines it. And in very plain and general terms, a constitution is a corporate identity. All of those questions that an individual might ask, who am I? That is a purpose, or a name rather. Why do I exist? That's the purpose. What do I look like? Well, that's the structure. What do I do? That's the function. And do I have any legal limitations? And those, with respect to limitations, can be seen in our Constitution as it reads now, that since we were a 501c3, a 501c3 is not allowed to conduct any sort of political campaigning. That is what is called a legal limitation. So let's go on to slide number 5. The bottom line is that the Constitution provides the fundamental principles that govern the corporation's operations. So let's go on to the next slide. What is my structure? Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we have the association. This is a who am I question. Who am I? The association sets up councils and civic clubs, just as we all know. And that, according to our Article 7 of the Constitution of the organization, tells us how we are made up. And that is that slide number 7. So, but how does the corporation actually function? Well, if we go to slide number 8, we'll have a clue. There you go. Next one. Next slide. It's through the bylaws. And those of you who serve in the association know that the bylaws are very important for our being able to operate. It tells us when to do things, how to do things, so that we conduct our business in an orderly manner. So now that we have the Constitution down, we have the bylaws down, we're good, right? We got it all down. But what happens if we have a pandemic like we had last year? What if we have a conflict between the Constitution and the bylaws and the language? What if the law changes and our Constitution and bylaws are out of step with the new laws? Well, maybe we should make some changes. Of course we should make some changes. We cannot have governing documents that are not relevant, that do not maybe comply with the law. So let's go on to the next slide. We are actually allowed to make changes, and both of our governing documents provide the direction as to how and when, and we're going to be able to do those amendments. Our Constitution, Article 9, Section 9, and the bylaws, Article 13, Section 1, tell us what we can do with respect to amendments. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. But why do we make changes? Well, there are lots of reasons, but these are basic ones. Our officers, that's our executive committee and the board, they have a legal duty to comply with our Constitution and bylaws, as well as state and federal laws. And as we know, things change. And it's still not 1922. We have to keep up with the times. Sometimes the governing documents are inconsistent. Sometimes they're repetitive. Sometimes the sections are unclear or vague, or they cause confusion. Sometimes maybe they're just plain wrong. And in actuality, our governing documents have to reflect the current state of affairs. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. And that's why the Constitutional Convention exists. That is the place where we go ahead and make those changes, those amendments. So let's go on to the next slide. So there are wonderful benefits to holding a constitutional convention. We want to be relevant. And our purpose and our reason for being under the Constitution should be reflected in the association's vision and strategic plan. And so that's why we have to look at our strategic plan and make sure that it relates back. We do this every 5 years, so that it relates back to our originating documents. Of course, just clerically, we have to update. We have to make sure that they comply with current laws. And it's a time when we take a deep and critical look as to the way our association functions and how our governing documents instruct us to function, and make sure that we are going to be able to do this correctly in the future and be pono. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so what do we have? What happens when we get there? You know, it's been a long time since we were there, and might be kind of foggy for us. But when we get there, you'll see that it looks pretty much like what happens when we get to a regular convention. We sit down, go to the big hall, gather together, and our delegates' credentials have to be verified. That means that you'll have done your registration and made sure that you're all pono with that, so that the person who is sitting in the chair for your club as a representative or a delegate to the con actually is authorized to be there. Our proposed rules for the con state that we will also be allowed to have alternates there, but half the number of the people who are attending as delegates, so that you will have some coverage there, but not the whole contingent will be there. And it's likely, at least in our club, we don't often need the assistance of an alternate, but oh my gosh, when something comes up, you're glad that they're there. So in this case, we will have half the number of delegates who are in attendance at the con. We'll all be in the convention hall. There will be motions, discussions, voting as per normal. The difference will be that we will be focusing on our amendments as opposed to resolutions. And of course, Robert's rules will govern. So let's go on to the next slide. So it's my understanding that, oh, excuse me, I take that back. You'll stand up at the mic, and as usual, as you would ordinarily do if you were speaking on behalf of your club, you would identify yourself and the club that you hail from, and you would make your motion with respect to the article and section that you wish to be, or you're proposing to amend. And you would go ahead and say, I move that Article 10, Section 3 be amended to state, and then provide that language. So that if your motion is approved, you'll go ahead and state your support very clearly and succinctly. And as you're looking for support, you should be looking at if there's details that you have, that evidence that you have, or for example, if you're making a clerical connection and you want to do it for clarification purposes, you can easily state that. Or you can say this section is confusing and I want to be able to clarify that it should say this in order to clarify that either awkwardness or vagueness in the language, the existing language. So just know that you're welcome to use your notes for reference there. I know sometimes when I stand up there and have to speak on behalf of my club that I forget all of the words and what I'm supposed to say. So it's really nice to have something to, little bullet points to remind me of what I'm doing. Finally, restate your position and thank the body for the opportunity to speak. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. So that's a repeat that shouldn't be there. Let's go on. Okay, let's go on. Now, we're looking at this. That voting section will be relevant in a little bit, so we'll come back to that. Let's see. Thank you. Now, we're looking at, oh, can you go back one, please? Okay, this is a sample amendment and it's taken from, actually, it's not the Article 10, it's Article 6, Section 4. And that relates to the president appointing a nominations chair when we have elections to facilitate the nominations, to go through the election process, and as well as the installation of the officers and directors. Now, if you look at that language there in italics, the installation shall take place at the final convention, AHCC, and shall be conducted in a dignified and culturally appropriate manner. I think that in looking at every article, every section, your thought, the initial thought should be, what is the purpose of this section? What's it doing here? Does it meet the purpose of our objectives under our Constitution? It might bring up other questions that you have. For me, it's glaring that if you look at 2022, our convention, there was no way we're going to be able to hold an installation at the final convention, AHCC, at all, because we met virtually and we had to. We didn't even have an installation until the most recent board meeting at the retreat. And it was conducted in a beautifully dignified and culturally appropriate manner. And so this section, at least for right now and looking into the future, and certainly our lessons from the pandemic, that needs to be updated and it needs to be expressed so that, yes, we can guarantee the orderly continuation of leadership in our association, but perhaps not in such specific terms as noting that it would be at the final convention, AHCC. We may not ever be able to have another one, at least within the next maybe couple years, I don't know. But the point is to have it at a time and a place that allows it to be conducted in a dignified and culturally appropriate manner. So now that we just had that little discussion about the language, once you answer your questions, then you'll end up with your rationale. So the middle section is the either the questions that you ask yourself, or with the charts that were sent out to you, you can put in your recommended changes there using the underline underscore feature for new language and the strike through feature for deleted language. And then the third column is your rationale. And I find that it's incredibly helpful because it keeps you organized, it keeps you in order, and it keeps all of your thoughts and organized and in one place. And I also found out that you can copy that section of the chart, put it into a new page in your document, and then when you go ahead and go to the Google form that is on the website to submit, you can just upload that section and it'll go lickety-split. So I found that that was extremely handy to be able to do. All right, so let's go on to the next section. Okay, so here's another one. And this one relates to our pu'uku, our treasurer. And that is Article 5B, Section 4. And it says, prior to taking office, the pu'uku shall execute and file a bond in amount determined by the Board of Directors. So my first question is, what's a bond? So I'm going to ask that question right now. What is a bond? Can anybody answer? Kelly, I see you talking.
I thought Maluhia might be able to answer this because she asked me the same question for Oahu Council.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you. It's insurance. Some form of insurance.
It is.
Yeah, it's insurance.
That's exactly what it is. But we don't usually refer to insurance as a bond. At least that's, for me, it's kind of old time language. But doesn't mean that you're an old time person. Yeah. But I found out that when I became a notary public, that I had to have a bond in the amount of $50,000 for the period of time that you serve, that your commission is in existence. And the purpose of that is to, in the event of an error, mistake, or an omission, or accident, whereby there's an error that is committed as a notary. For example, if a notary is to notarize the signature of a person who is unable to say what day it is, who the president is, who the name of the child that brought them, or the name of their children, who doesn't know why that person is sitting there or what the document is. If the notary goes ahead and notarize that signature, that is clearly an error and an omission, which means that any other beneficiaries under that will, who may have been intentionally omitted, would have at least a claim against the notary for going ahead and notarizing that signature on that will. And if they suffered any damages because of that, and I mean financial damages, they would be able to make a claim on that bond. Oftentimes, corporations, large corporations, they have their treasurers, their financial officer bonded for the very same reason, and also because investors, they want to see that if their investment is going into a corporation that protects its investors by making sure that its financial officer is bonded. Okay, so now we know what the bond is, what its function is, and then you look at why. What are the arguments to keep or modify this section? And this answer, the answer that you give to this third section, is going to give you your rationale. So let's think through this, and that is, oh, you know, my auntie has been the pu'uku for the last 30 years, and I trust her. She would never, never do anything wrong. Okay. On the other side, yes, auntie is very trustworthy, and she's done this for many, many years, but maybe she didn't know that the law changed, that she needs to file this one document that she didn't know about, and that causes a problem. Of course, she didn't intend to do that at all. And yes, it was an error, but at the same time, it's great to have a bond in situations like that, or even in situations where there is an intentional act that causes some kind of harm to the people who are being who should be protected. So now you have arguments on both sides. And maybe the one argument is that this provision here, this section, relates to all treasurers, not just auntie, and all treasurers who will potentially serve the association. And we want to make sure that in whatever situation, if there is an error or an issue that causes a problem, that we don't have to worry about it, that our corporation, the association, is protected. So I think maybe, at least in my mind, my answer would be, well, as much as I love auntie, it would be best to protect our corporation, our association, by having this. And it's not anything to say that auntie will make a mistake or has made a mistake. It's just there for protection. It's like when you go out driving, you always have to wear clean underwear. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Okay, that's it. Great. Now, let's just talk for a little bit. So we're POW with the slideshow. Let's just talk for a little bit. Great. Thank you, Kela'i, for doing that. So you need to know that at the end of the day, once the Constitutional Convention is POW, we will end up with a certain work product of approved amendments. And the question is, okay, so what? Well, those approved amendments then will be referred to the president of the association and will be taken up for a vote, ratification of those amendments during the regular convention time. And at that time, it'll be up to the House of Delegates to vote to ratify the amendments and the bylaws. So thing to remember is that just because they may be ratified right then and there, it doesn't mean that they're going to take effect immediately, because we need the time to print them up and distribute them so that all of the members have, and their clubs and councils, everyone has a chance to have them in hand and then be prepared for the next convention. Besides, it would be completely impractical to be, I can just see us going back and forth, wondering which one has been amended and how are we supposed to do this right now? So that's why they take effect at the close of the convention. And then going back to the Constitution in Article 9, our Constitution requires a 2/3 vote to amend the Constitution, which is a very high bar. Whereas the bylaws, which is our how-to document, in Article 13, Section 1, only a majority vote of the assembled delegates is required to amend the bylaws. So I'm going to ask you and remind you that you should be using and referring to the current governing documents, current version of the governing documents. They are actually posted on the website. When you get into the constitutional amendments section, you will see that they are posted there. And that you'll also see that there is a form, a Google form, that is there for your convenience to submit the proposed amendments. You can use a chart, as I told you, or a Word document. And the blessing is that you will receive a confirmation that your form has been received. Let's see, we all know or should know that the deadline to submit the proposed amendments is September 5th, 2021, next week. We have posted proposed Constitutional Convention rules, or rules of the Constitutional Convention, which are also on the website. Please review them carefully and discuss them with your clubs, because like the proposed rules of the convention last year, we will have to vote on them. So as Hailama always says, you know, you need to come prepared, and that's part of the preparation. So let's see. Okay, I think that was my last thought. I know that Carol has a few more items that she'd like to bring up for right now before we entertain questions.
Thank you, Edie.
My pleasure.
You covered those bullets that I wanted to, and I'm going to ask Ili if he would put up now the slide, Hailama's Kahua slide, please. When we were at the association board met for our strategic planning in July, and on Saturday, we began the work for the Constitutional Convention. At the very beginning of the morning, Hailama presented these bullet points referencing each member's kuleana in the Constitutional Convention. Very, very pertinent, thoughtful, helpful hints that we should keep in mind. There are, as you will recall, on our worksheet, on the fourth column to the right was the rationale. And that's going to be important for the committee as these amendments come in. There may be amendments for the same section, for the same article, same section. And the rationale is going to be really important. So present the facts. Why are you doing what you're doing? Importantly, I love hearing this, be a participant. I was the one always in second grade on the last row. Not anymore. I always look for the seat that's in the front and be a participant. If there's any group that is spirited, this is Oahu Council. The association looks to you. You are the very spirited ones in this association. We want you also to be resolution oriented. Be concise. I love this last bullet on the left column. We are a people, a lahui, that are governed by values. We go from the na'au. So when you stand at that mic and you say, I feel, that is because behind of you, your kupuna are reminding you why you have done what you've done with that amendment. And certainly if your statement begins with, I believe, that means I know that you've done your research and can justify why you are doing what you're doing. The rest of it, you know, you can read that. But the last one that, again, Tony and I, we come from a generation, not Tony Lee. So here's these three letters on the board, WTF. And I said, what is that? So it has to be interpreted for people like Kupuna like me. What's the function why are you presenting that resolution? And of course, if you come from Kikaha, Kauai, you probably would say, huh? So, pohai lama, mahalo to him for getting us all braced up and ready for ConCon. We want to entertain some questions. You've been so kind. Let's look at the chat if there are any questions now without even the chat, or even as we eyeball your hands and you raise your hands. And so we've got Dre and Edie here to kokua and answer questions. Mai. Oh, you're surprising me. There are no questions?
That's what I was
Ken
just going to say. Hearing none.
There's some questions. Hands are raised. Ken Farm and then Auntie Momi.
Okay.
Please take them in the order. I wasn't watching the,
Okay, go ahead,
the
Ken.
order.
Thank you. In the previous slide, and what you were talking about, you're saying if a motion was approved, does that mean that the motion was seconded? I just kind of want a clarification on that.
The usual process, the usual
Okay.
process. Thank you.
Auntie Momi.
There she is.
Mahalo, Auntie Carol and Edith. Thank you so much for that very educational and informative presentation. I just wanted to make a couple notes, and then I do have a question.
Yes.
And that is, and that's because I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing this for others. So on the slide that talks about how often we are able to introduce amendments to the Constitution and bylaws, you show every 10 years. However, the Constitution and bylaws do allow us to introduce amendments at annual conventions. So just thought I'd mention that.
That is true.
And then on the slide, where the slide, I think it's entitled Make Motions to Present Your Amendments. I want to recommend that instead of saying, if your motion is approved, state your arguments, that perhaps it should say, after your motion is introduced, state your arguments. Yeah.
Yes.
That might make it just a little bit clearer.
Thanks.
And then I actually went in to try to test out the form for submitting amendments. And I cannot find a place that asks for the rationale, which Carol, emphasized is important for you to know. I do find, though, that there is a section that says, if you have a Word document with your changes, please upload it here. And so my recommendation is you may want to add something to say, use this section to add your rationale for the change.
Okay, because I did that, and as I was saying, I saved that section of the chart that I was working on to another document. And then when I went ahead and did the form, I just uploaded that so that they would have the section there as well as the language changes and the rationale.
Yes.
Yes.
But I did not see that on the proposed amendments form. And that was the form I'm going to submit our club's amendments, proposed amendments.
Did you receive the two chart documents by way of an email?
No, I have not seen them. I'm not sure when they were transmitted, but
they can be sent out again.
Yeah, great, thank you. Because we want to be sure to do this right.
Oh, and make it easy too.
Yeah, and is it appropriate for me to now introduce the questions that I gave you a heads up on?
Absolutely.
Can I do that? Okay.
Yes.
So I don't know if this is really important, but as you know, in our association. We are process-oriented and rules-oriented. We follow Robert's rules. So I had a few questions. One was, does the October 1st date for circulation of proposed amendments to clubs satisfy the requirement contained in the AHCC Constitution, Article 9, Section 1, and AHCC Bylaws, Article 12, Section 1, that seem to require circulation of proposed amendments to clubs 60 days prior to the convention? I will acknowledge that that provision is not so clear, because the way it's worded is it's you submit the proposed amendments to the president and circulation to clubs 60 days prior to the convention. So it's hard to do, to get it to the president 60 days before and then get it circulated. I just want to be sure that if this might become a point of order, that we already addressed it in advance, so that we don't, have this whole process nullified.
Now that's understood. And if anyone has taught me about being process oriented and procedurally oriented, it's you, Lemomo. And I'm grateful for that. I really am, because when I joined 25 years ago, I had no clue about the association or what it did. And so that I'm grateful for. Thank you. So yes, when I looked at that section, those sections, I said, if we're going to be up all night and we still won't be finished going through all of these amendments and they have to be sent out the same day, I don't think that's possible. And so our group discussed it, and the Constitutional Convention is actually a special convention. And as such, for that reason, we've drafted proposed rules, which, like the rules of convention for 2020, will need to be voted on prior to the Constitutional Convention actually proceeding. And under those proposed rules, we are providing 30 days to review and organize the submissions. It relates to the convention, and we have, as we know, we have all kinds of rules that relate to the convention. There's a lot of specificity there. With respect to a constitutional convention, there's relatively little, aside from saying that we can have a constitutional convention. But as a special convention, we are able to make the practical arrangements so that we can carry out the business and receive the information, and then also distribute it in an organized way so that it is organized for the members to be able to review and have sufficient time to prepare before the convention, the Constitutional Convention itself. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. So I'm understanding that as we don't have standing rules yet approved, the proposal is the deadline that's been established, and then the 30 days in advance.
Yes.
So I get that. The second thing, though, and this one's more problematic for me, and that is that in the draft rules, it allows for proposed amendments to be made at the convention, on the day of the convention. So that one is quite problematic for me, because I believe that the intent of requiring that at least circulation of 60 days before or 30 days before is to allow for clubs to kuka, and you have more voices involved than if you spring it on the day of the convention, and it's only the delegates there, which is 1/2 of the delegates of the previous convention. So you don't have time to get the mana'o of your club. So that one is a little problematic for me, but, and I'll just express that, but I understand if that continues to be proposed, on the day of the convention, I guess we'll just address it then, meaning that we can vote that down if we want, or split it out when we vote on the standing rules for further discussion.
Madam Chairman,
Right?
if I, as a member of the committee who brought this issue up originally, may I address Leimomi's?
Of course, of course.
All right. And I'm sorry, Clea, and I saw your hand up before you jump on this. The issue, this is a prime issue of why we need to have a con-con, why this constitution and bylaws need to be amended, because it presents on its own face a conflicting idea that is unaccomplishable, no matter how you read this. In other words, 60 days is when it needs to be submitted and then circulated. I understand there's another interpretation to that issue. However, at the same time, the issue was whether you could present amendments at the con-con itself. And when I looked at the issue, I thought that was resolvative. In other words, I don't know if that's your word, but it's because we would allow for amendments to be made on the floor. We circumvented the issue of circulation necessarily. And that's how we opened the two things, but that basically they conflict with each other. The issue conflicts with each other. Because no one will be able to prepare for an amendment on the floor, even though it's a special convention for the purpose of amending the Constitution. That in itself should open the floor up, period, to any amendments, because that's what the purpose of that convention is for, is to amend the Constitution and bylaws, or consider amendments to the Constitution and bylaws. But we tend to take shortcuts in when we create our Constitution and bylaws and create the conflict that the interpretive conflict that we are now facing. So I think the issue of circulation is curative by the purpose of allowing amendments to come from the floor. That is why I didn't further argue the point in our own committee. Thank you.
I should say that when I looked at that, I developed a really bad case of heartburn, because our bylaws are so clear as to the submission times for resolutions. It's also very clear what happens with late resolutions. You have to justify the reason for its lateness to the entire body. And then now that we're doing, trying to do amendments to our governing documents, we don't do that. And so I had to look at I looked at our past practice, and I saw that in our prior constitutional convention that there were amendments that came by motion from the floor. They were permissible. Also, the other reason is that we want to encourage amendments to be brought up. And as Rusty says, yes, sometimes it'll click in your head, and you'll need to make a motion to either clarify or not, or change some language. But again, the con-con is a special convention. And so in that, there is room, and I will say the evil word, wiggle room, to allow this to happen. Now, practically speaking, though, every one of us who is attending as a delegate or an alternate will have gone through these two documents with a fine-tooth comb. Maybe they haven't thought of everything, every single issue, but they will have reviewed these documents and will be prepared to at least think about the propositions that are being raised by these spontaneous motions. So our committee worked really hard on this issue, and we believe, due to the past practices, which do play a role in our association, and due to the fact that we want to encourage amendments, our membership to bring amendments from the floor, that we will permit them. Is that helpful?
Yes, Chair, that is very helpful to understand the rationale. I very much appreciate the fact that the committee is trying to encourage members to be more active. I just have a concern, though, about assuring, to the extent that we can, trying to get the amendments in early so that clubs can discuss it. Because of not, what I fear is that those who are not as familiar with Robert's rules and who could possibly, submit amendments at the last minute, and we haven't had opportunity to really think through the advantages and disadvantages of that could become problematic. But
understood.
But I understand you did your homework. Thank you so much for doing that with regard to past practice. And often we do things based on our past practices.
Yes.
And I would just mention the upside of allowing that is that, it's the 28th today, and we just recently got the notice about the Constitutional Convention. So it has not provided a lot of time for clubs to do this homework. And thus, allowing for amendments to be made on the floor, that's helpful to allow us to do that. And my last thing was, I just wondered if you might share the rationale as to a rumor that I heard that the AHCC chair ruled that the determination by the delegates at the last convention to postpone or defer this con, that he ruled it out of order. I wondered if you could provide some explanation for that.
Yes, of course. I did have a set of notes here, and they are somewhere handy. That is true. That is true. And this was brought up for hello, where are we? Okay, there we are. Sorry. Let's see, I'm looking for my document, but what I did want to say that the issue was that the issue came up after the board meeting, not at the board meeting, but the convention last year. At that time, and heaven forbid, but it was out of the Policy and Planning Committee, my bad, that there was a recommendation, a motion recommendation to defer the Constitutional Convention, which would have been happening in 2021, the year after the elections. Also in the convention, there was another committee, another recommendation and a vote that was taken to defer that issue. There was argument that actually voted that down, saying that under our bylaws, you vote and the outcomes of the votes are to adopt, to not adopt, or to adopt as amended. Now, that was further on after the Policy and Planning Committee report and the action taken there. And so it was raised to High Lama that, how come we can't do that in this one instance, and in the instance of the Policy and Planning Committee, we can defer. And so that was an issue that arose that he brought forward to the board of directors. He requested an opinion from our parliamentarian. And the parliamentarian, after quite some time, she provided an opinion or position and stated that indeed because our bylaws provide for a vote to be not adopt, or adopt as amended, that actually the vote for the Policy Planning Committee to, on our recommendation to defer the Constitutional Convention was out of order. And because of that, they retook the vote, and the board of directors voted to go forward. I believe they voted to go forward.
No, I don't believe there was a vote.
Okay, so that's right, it wasn't. Hailama said because of that, because it was out of order, that we would go forward with the Constitutional Convention this.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so my hand was up to address what Lemomi
I am
said
so
earlier,
sorry.
but that's okay. But I'm going to address this first. First of all, the motion was not to defer because I made the motion.
Hang on.
So
There's someone who is unmuted, but there's noise in the background. So can you take care of that? Yes. Can you please mute if you're not speaking? Everyone, just check your mics, please.
It actually might be coming from probably Ina's room.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
The motion was not to defer because I'm the one who made the motion.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's what the chair is going to hang his hat on, then he does not have the authority to call for a con-con. A con-con has to be voted on the affirmative by the body. The body voted to not have a con-con. That's what the vote was, to not have a con-con. And then issues would be brought to the Policy and Planning Committee chair at the 2021 convention. And at that point, they would decide whether to have a con-con in 2022. That's not the same as deferring the matter. But if that's what he's going to hang his hat on, he does not have the authority to do that. The body has to vote. And I won't get into the argument anymore, Madam Chair. This is neither the place or the forum to have this debate. But because the question was asked, I'm addressing that.
Thank you.
To go back to what your the matter that was brought up by Lemomi, your proposed rules for the 30 days, that will be out of order because the 30 days have already passed by the time we vote to approve those rules. And to address what Rusty said, the 60-day notice for amendments that are in our constitution and bylaws refers to the annual convention or the convention of the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs.
Right.
As you stated, this is a special convention, so that those bylaws and those constitution articles do not apply.
Right.
If you guys want to set 30 days, you can set 30 days, you can set 5 days, you can set 24 hours, you can set whatever you want. That's the reason why, and actually Robert's rules does cover this. That's the reason why amendments can be brought up on the floor, because the reason this convention is being called is specifically to amend these documents. There is no rule. Well, we don't currently have a rule in our governing documents that says you have to submit amendments to these documents in any time frame beforehand for a constitutional convention. That 60 days is specific to the annual convention.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions or clarification? Lemomi, you're muted.
Thank you for acknowledging me, Chair. So, I'm going to disagree with the former speaker because I believe that the language in our Constitution and bylaws under amendments very clearly says proposed amendments, in this case to the bylaws, shall be submitted to the Pelikikena of the association and circulated to each club by the Planning and Policy Committee no later than 60 days prior to the next convention, etc. However, I'm not going to make it an issue, and I will recommend that my club not make it an issue. But I do think that if any of us feel that there is a point of order, that not wait until the day of the convention to bring it up, that we at least give your committee a heads up so that you are able to discuss this with the Pelikikena of the association. So for example, Kale'aina's observation that if the Pelikikena's decision was made because he thought the motion was a motion different than what is allowed in our bylaws, and that is adopt, not adopt, adopt as amended. Unless, you know, the minutes of the meeting should accurately reflect what the motion was. So if the minutes is as Kale'aina says, because he says he made the motion, and I think he's saying he made the motion not to adopt the convention as was planned for 2021, allow the Policy and Planning Committee to, you know, study this issue and then come with their recommendations to this convention. If that is a point that Kale'aina is correct on, meaning that the president made his decision because he thought the motion wasn't proper, and in fact the motion was proper, then that is an issue that should be addressed now, because otherwise, when we get to convention, we're going to spend a lot of time trying to deal with that point of order. So I just would like to recommend that this discussion be held with the Pelikikena and the parliamentarian consultant, so that we can get this issue resolved.
Lemomi.
Yeah, I think your comment should be directed to the chair, Kale'aina.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the issue with that is the minutes will not be provided to the body until after the constitutional convention. We will not receive the minutes until we attend the annual convention.
So chair.
Yes.
Okay, so that is another issue that has always been a problem in recent years. And that is that we don't get minutes until sometimes just the day before the convention. So I think it's really important to get those minutes out and for the president to review them quickly on this issue.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the fundamental question actually revolves around something that's totally different than what is being discussed right now. I brought this up before. The fundamental question is, everybody seems to be interpreting our bylaws incorrectly. It does not say that a committee has only 3 choices and that the body has only 3 choices on what the committee said. The committee makes a recommendation. The body does whatever it wants with that recommendation. Read the bylaws. It talks about section 7 of the bylaws. This is why I have submitted changes to Article 10 of the bylaws to correct this problem. It says the committee, all committees will recommend the following things to happen. That's what it says. It doesn't say anything else. It says committees will recommend to adopt, and the committee recommendation may include, and I'm quoting directly, the report may include to adopt, not to adopt, or to adopt as amended. It does not say anything about what the body can do with what the committee recommends. It's a recommendation. All committees are, and so now we're interpreting all over the place, all kinds of things, what the body cannot do because the committee recommended something, you know? And as far as I'm concerned, that's why I'm making the submitting corrections to this section, you know, to clarify exactly what the committee is supposed to do and exactly what the body, who has all the authority to do anything it wants to do by vote, because that's what the meat of the whole situation is. So the president misinterpreted, it was a mistake. The parliamentarian misinterpreted, it was a mistake, and now we're here. And this wouldn't be a problem if we followed 10 years ago the recommendations that were made in the document for the governing of a CONCON, which means that on the 9th year, prior to the 10th year of the CONCON, where the CONCON is to be convened, we were supposed to start working on this whole situation for 1 full year. So we would, by the time we led up to a CONCON, we wouldn't be in this situation where 3 weeks before the CONCON, the Rules Committee of the CONCON are setting rules that create deadlines that are 3 weeks away. And so we cured that problem, I thought. I'm not the most brilliant person in the world, but we cured that problem by saying amendments can come up on the floor. So there really is no argument specifically about that. The mistake happened almost a year ago. You cannot make a ruling. I don't care how you do this, you cannot make a ruling without violating the due process of the delegates after a convention has been adjourned.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I agree with everything that Rusty just said. However, 12 years ago on Kauai, I was ruled out of order when I said that the bylaws say may suggest the committees may recommend when I tried to defer a matter, and I was overruled and ruled out of order by the president. And they said that was, and I, at the time, I said, if that's going to be the stance of the association, then remember this day on Kauai, because Delegate Lee at the time from Pearl Harbor Hawaiian Civic Club will constantly remind you of it, because I am being ruled out of order for trying to defer a matter. And the president so ruled, and I appealed the ruling, and the body so ruled. So I agree with everything Rusty says. I tried to make that point 12 years ago, and I was overruled, which is why I'm the very first one when someone tries to defer something who jumps to the mic and has them ruled out of order, because that's the way the body so wanted it. So I agree with everything you're saying, Rusty, everything.
So as you can see, you can see that our committee had some whippersnapper meetings, and I'm grateful for every person on the committee because the thinking is good.
Edith, my words for today is,
I've had my hand up, Rusty, before you.
We grow.
Okay. Did you tell me, go girl? Thank you.
No, I said,
Okay.
I said we grow. You know.
Okay, yes, we go. Okay. So I have to tell you that today, because of another meeting we had, I realized that I am a member of this association for 60 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in fact, one of my mentors was Rusty's father, Walter.
Oh.
In any case, I was there for what the example of what happened with Kaleina. I was there. I was there when President Bruce Kepler, I don't know whether it was me he ruled out of order or someone else, on this same point. And time again at recent conventions, we allow things because, quote, it's been past practice. This has been a past practice that we allow adopt, not adopt, or adopt is amended, and we don't allow other motions to be made. Not saying that that's correct or not. I'm saying that we have precedent set that has been the ruling. And as Kaleina pointed out, vote taken on the floor when he tried to appeal the ruling. And that's what the body decided, that it would just be those three. So we have opportunity at this constitutional convention, if it happens, to fix that, to make that more clear.
Well,
again, I'm just recommending to meet with the president and the parliamentarian to be in position to answer this issue, because it may come up on the floor, and I would just hate us spending a lot of time debating this issue.
Understood.
More important things, yeah.
Understood and very much appreciated. I'll make sure that that happens. Are there any other questions or thoughts or corrections? Leimomi, you raised your hand again. No problem. Did you say, oh, I'm sorry? I was reading lips. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Anybody else? I hear crickets.
Auntie Tony has
Auntie
her hand up.
Tony? Oh, there you go. Yes, Auntie Tony.
Thank you, Edie.
You're welcome.
You know, this is a good discussion.
It is.
It's a good learning process. I see many new faces, and they're probably scratching their heads, trying to figure out what's going on.
That's okay.
And it is okay. However, there was so much discussion in regards to this con at convention. It was not a slam dunk deal. It was a lot of discussion, and the body voted. You know, I've been a member of the Civic Club longer than Leimomi, and I'm not going to age myself, Leimomi. However, we are not a top-down organization. To you, those of you that are brand new, we are a bottom-up organization, which is why we've been around for 2 or 3 years. So when a body speaks, and these are really unprecedented times, yes, we did a convention like we've never done before. So, you know, we made mistakes. So, okay, it's okay to make mistakes. However, I would hate to see a vote that had a lot of thought in it. I thought there was a lot of discussion, as I said, and it's too bad that we don't have minutes. You know, there used to be a time when minutes were passed out in the April meeting of convention, or sometime during the summer at latest. So we would not have to sit and, you know, take people's words for it, but actually see it in its entirety. I say to the body, what's the rush? Yes, we do need a con. We don't need to have it today or this year. Because as you all recall in the discussion, there wasn't anything that was brought up at the full discussion, an in-depth discussion about why we needed to have it, because we didn't do our homework, technically, like we're supposed to, so many days prior to convention. And you know what? That's okay. We are in unprecedented times. So I think we need to take a breath, step back. Again, what is the rush that we have to do this? Let's make this a learning process for many of our new people that have come on board now to join this very auspicious organization, and show them that we are not a top-down organization. We are a bottom-up, and when the body speaks, yeah, then we listen. And we don't change our mind, less than 30 days prior to convention, or even if it was brought up at a retreat recently. Let's stick to our word and our kupuna, who set all of this in place for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Tony. Is there anyone else? Kali'i, I turn it back over to you.
Mahalo, Chair Edith Kawai. And
It was our pleasure. My thanks to my committee.
Yes, thank you all and thank you members for joining. Let me stop the recording. I have asked Auntie Maluhia to give us a pule ho'oku'u. So Auntie Maluhia,